All right, well, thanks a lot for the invitation to come and talk today about a topic that's kind of near and dear to my heart. I am a social scientist and I do research on attitudes and messaging, and I've spent a lot of time spying on people who are not looking at signs in parks, and I teach courses in environmental interpretation and communication theory, so this was kind of fun to put together. I do realize that it's late in the day. I think I have 20 minutes. I think I'm still allowed 20 minutes, and hopefully it will be a little less than that, because I know it's you've been sitting for a long time today. So my very brief goals are to talk about a few of the key things about why it's challenging to communicate through messaging, to get your message across to people, and then I have 10 tips about things that you could do. We could spend a lot of time talking about a variety of kinds of things, but I've got just some tips out there, a lot of pictures that hopefully you'll find a little bit engaging. And my remarks are mostly around static messaging and signage. That seems like that place where we're often interfacing with recreational users, but a lot of the points also apply to online environments, in-person, and a variety of kinds of settings. Okay, so why is it hard to get your message across? Well, at the very first sort of initial thing is often we just can't capture people's attention. This picture from Yosemite, I mean, look at this lovely sign. That sign panel is probably 4 feet by 4 feet. It's a beautiful interpretive sign, but you've got a busy site and you're competing with gorgeous scenery. So a lot of times we just don't capture people's attention. And if we don't capture their attention, guaranteed we're not going to get a message across. But sometimes even where the setting itself isn't in conflict with our messaging, we just don't do a very good job of creating signage that captures people's attention. You look at this fabulous example here, and like how many of you just want to run right up and read that sign, right? I mean, it's like, you know, okay, maybe not so much. And often in recreation settings, we're dealing with people who know the site, they're pretty sure they know everything they need to know about it. And it's like, yeah, I know I'm in wolf country, I'm not going to read this message, it's obviously not for me. We're dealing with visitors who've been driving a long time, they got to this great spot, the kids are running around, they got to catch the dog that's peeing on the plants. And so you have, you know, our tendency to want to put everything into a signboard like this, and what does that visitor want, you know? They're like, oh God, it's just a bunch of regulations and it starts out pursuant to 36 CFR something. And so, you know, we just don't hold their attention. This sign captures people's attention. They see it, they notice it, but it's not going to hold people's attention. And for sure, you know, you just sit in the bushes for a little while and watch people and you get really humbled about your messaging and its effectiveness. And then, you know, even if we do some nice design things, a lot of times the topics just aren't what people are interested in, or they maybe don't know they're interested in them. And, you know, we tend to like, so we're sciencey types and we got lots of facts we want to put in here, and you know, a sign like this about noxious weeds, you know, just isn't going to be all that interesting. It could be made interesting, but in this kind of format, the easy default format just isn't interesting to people. So, but even if we can capture people's attention and hold their attention, a lot of times our messages just aren't compelling. And I really loved the discussion about the mountain goats because it really illustrates this. I mean, here you got somebody who's like, oh, they're just so cute, you know, and I could get a picture. And, you know, feed a pigeon, lose a finger, you know, doesn't that just make, you can just see the 14-year-old kids going, I'm going to go feed these pigeons and see if they really, you know, will bite my little brother. So we have to overcome this problem with some of our messaging to be convincing to people that there really is something that they need to pay attention to and act on. Sometimes our messaging is even sort of subtly backfires. This is from a sign in a community in California, I think. Nice coyote warning sign. Coyotes have been seen, they're a natural part of the environment, they're wary of people and generally go to extremes to avoid contact. Oh good, they're not a problem. Right? So you don't want to scare the heck out of people, but you also don't want to make them totally complacent when they should be really paying attention. So it's tough. So what can we do to increase success? And pulled this one picture is from, it's kind of tragic. Somebody had like drowned there a week before. I don't know exactly what the nature of that site is. It certainly doesn't look that dangerous, but obviously the signs aren't working too well. So the first thing is deliver your message at the right place and time. I have these two pictures up here that relate to food storage in bear country to drive home the point that if people need to get the message before they arrive on site, giving them the message on site is too late. So either you need long enough rope or you need a bear canister, and that message needs to get to people before they show up at some remote wilderness trailhead. So if you've got a situation, something that you're trying to think about communicating, think about where the right place and time is to capture your particular audience. If you're concerned about not capturing people's attention, you can capitalize on novelty. Some of you may have seen versions of this sign. I first saw it maybe 10 years ago, and I just love it because it's like, it totally, you think about the audience, right? Cigarette butts, habitual behavior, totally zoning out. You're in a location where you just like, throw your cigarette butt on the ground, and it's funny, so it doesn't alienate people. It's not punitive, but it's, it captures their attention, and, it's probably more effective than some kind of fine sign. But you want to be careful capitalizing on novelty. I found this sign, and it claims to be from the National Park Service, so I believe that it is. But you look at this and it's like, wanted for extortion of snack food, larceny, and burglary, red fox. And I kind of wonder what message it's sending to the audiences about this. And if the fine print talks about how foxes can steal your car keys and your hiking boots and stuff like that. And so I think it's supposed to get you sort of involved in like want to find out what foxes do and then, store stuff appropriately. But if people only spend 3 seconds reading it, they get as far as, red foxes are bad. So be careful about using novel signage. Make your messages vivid. This is a sort of a classic, everybody in this room I'm sure has seen interpretive signs like this, mountain lion, a lovely, title, it tells you nothing really. And, mountain lions are important members of the natural community and may be found here. Is that your key message? Not so much, not if what you're worrying about is how, to keep your kids safe around mountain lions. So think about ways you can make your message more vivid. Sometimes, agencies don't like to do this. We have our branding standards or whatever, but guarantee you one of these signs is more effective than the other. Also, be specific. How many of us have seen signs about keep a good distance from wildlife? How many people know what 100 yards is? Not a lot of people. So a sign like this, warning, bear frequenting area, there's no guarantee of your safety. That's pretty generic. A sign like this, is your food stored properly right now? Immediately store all food. Put your empty coolers outside with the top off. It's very specific about what the appropriate behavior is. Much more likely to get that behavior than a generic sign. Resist the temptation to write long messaging. Be brief. A sign like this, maybe people will read the first block of text. It's, cute but not terribly engaging kind of sign. The same center that has this sign has this one. Now, there's some design features that maybe aren't so great about this sign, but they chose a key message about how feeding bread to ducks can cause permanent deformities. And there's actually even some better ones that have, pictures of deformed ducks and raise some more empathy. Say it visually where you can. I really like this one. I think it illustrates that point that was being made earlier about how do you communicate people what the appropriate distance is to stay from wildlife. So it uses a picture. It has that, doesn't say wildlife live here in this park. It says animals are dangerous, and it really clearly makes that point. A really critical thing is to connect to your audience's values. There's different ways a message can be framed. Any message can be delivered in a variety of ways. And some of those ways are going to engage and draw in and generate receptivity, and some of them are going to just turn people off and they're just going to react against your message. So understanding what it is that your audience values and cares about is really important. A sign like this, do not feed the wildlife, violators will be cited. It plays to people's fear, essentially, our base moral reasoning that, I want to avoid penalty and punishment. But if I know that there's nobody around because the Forest Service doesn't have any money and they don't have rangers out anymore, that's not going to be a very effective message. Or, something like this. This is also about coyotes. Keep me wild. So this sign is trying to appeal to people who care about the biospheric concerns. And there would be other ways to frame these same messages, whether it's about protecting your children or, whatever that might be. From aquatic invasives, playing to people's pride, sense of identity, be a hero, transport zero, nice slogan. Probably more effective than a punitive kind of message. And you've got to find a compelling argument, particularly in these cases where, people might not believe it. You look at this, come on, don't touch me, please. What do you want to do? You totally want to go pet that cute little fawn. Whereas this other message, the most dangerous animal in America, deaths per year, deer are more dangerous than bears and wolves and crocodile alligators and snakes and stuff. Emotion can be great for capturing and holding attention. It can create novelty and vividness, and when done well, it can be really effective. So one like this, don't move a muscle, a cute little pun, probably draws people in. If all you read is the title and you don't know anything about zebra mussels, like don't move a muscle, you kind of want to know what that message is about. So that's probably a good one. It's simple, it's specific, it has some visuals. But a message like this, please be safe, don't stand, climb, lean on fences. This is from like a wildlife park or something. If you fall, animals could eat you, that might make them sick. That could backfire, right? That people don't take it very seriously. So humor is often used and can often be used effectively. Just be a little careful with how you do that. This is a sign from Yosemite, and Yosemite has experimented with some kind of interesting kinds of messaging. I realize the image quality is not very good, but this is from up in the waterfall areas where a couple of kids were swept away over the waterfalls, and this is a place where it's been really difficult to communicate effectively the dangers of getting in the water up there, and they use a narrative approach, and they quote this mother who said, "We weren't swimming, we were only wading," very short messaging, plays on empathy without, being sort of over pulling on the heartstrings. Is not like those SPCA commercials on TV with the sad dogs that you have to change the channel immediately because you can't stand to watch them. They have a nice balance here of playing to some empathy and being novel and perhaps being more compelling as a result. And then my last tip, which is just critically important, I think it's kind of run through the discussions today, is you've got to monitor and evaluate. Every setting, audience, situation is different. I've done a lot of research on signage and messaging, and most of it just makes me really humble about how many times I've been wrong about what's going to be effective and how it's going to work with different audiences. Too often we just put signs up and we assume that they're going to work, you really need to confirm that they do. So you can use these great tips, but then it's important to build in that monitoring. So, yeah, love this, got this cell phone out with the deer sticking the head in the car. So a few key things just to summarize. Figure out what your key messages are, break them down, make them vivid, attention capturing. I love the example with the mountain goats of using multiple media. All of those things are important. You've got to deal with social media. You've got to deal with on-site. In-person is really effective, but you're resource constrained. So think about the overall context, your audiences, and the different settings. Use design, visuals, text to capture attention and hold attention if you need to. Really think through what are compelling arguments for your audience, and then assess how well you've done and adapt. And there are so many great examples out there now. When I started teaching environmental interpretation way many years ago, there weren't all that many examples, and now it's like, I need a sign about messaging for mountain goats. What's out there? And there's lots of good examples and lots of bad examples that you can draw from. So I think we might have time for a question or two.
Thank you. Questions for Troy? Plenty of time. do have smartphone now, so.
The question was, what about using the QR codes on signs, and are they effective? I do not know. Does anybody here have experience with that? I know that it's definitely gets considered. I honestly don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're becoming increasingly popular, and they might be a really good way, and a good way for long-term sort of communication. Yeah.
I have a question about messaging on a slightly different topic. Lately, there seems to be a lot of multimedia marketing to encourage people to go visit the national forest by the Discover the Forest campaign in summer. It's all over the place. And so sitting in here today, what's your take on the logic or the disconnect, or are we setting ourselves up? You know, I don't know, they're obviously spending a lot of money trying to get more people to use the forest, and it's actually their own agency doing that. So what do you think about that in terms of messaging and how that's setting us up here?
Okay, so the question is, the agencies are both talking about challenges with increasing recreation like we've been talking about today, but at the same time, the agencies are promoting outdoor recreation, and there's widespread interest across society in promoting outdoor recreation. You know, I think just generally the benefits we hear about with outdoor recreation itself, the health benefits, the developing support for public lands, that's a real philosophical question that could take a lot of discussion. And I know I've been part of several discussions in the last year or so where, you know, yeah, why would we want to exclude people from their public lands getting all these benefits? How do we trade that off? And so that's the real challenge. One thing I will say, though, is that the marketing on the get outside and go visit is way better than our messaging about, you know, preventing the impacts. I think, you know, marketers, those tourism marketing type folks have it dialed in.
What we are trying in the Alps, we have some cooperation with some apps. For example, like I read some apps here, we have some different one in Europe, and you know, they are most hikers just using a smartphone, and when they are reaching some points, they just popping up some signs there. Perhaps that should be also great.
Did you have a question about those apps?
It was just a recommendation of new idea for them.
Yeah. So creating apps that hikers could sort of, or recreational users could interface with on site. Yeah, and I think we've been seeing more of those. I mean, it works multiple ways, right? It's an opportunity for the agencies to communicate with visitors, but then there's on the private side as well. I mean, you know, you see all of the various apps you can load on your phone and then go hike, and you can click on the photo points and like where you are, add your photo and upload. I think my impression is that the agencies are more constrained in adopting technology quickly, that kind of technology quickly. So maybe it's a thing for partners to do. Was that diplomatic enough? Any other questions?
Oh, in the back.
One back?
So we have the yield triangle for trail use, you know, where hikers and bikers yield first and so on. And it's pretty ubiquitous at all of our trailheads on my Ranger district. And I'm kind of wondering if maybe it might be too ubiquitous. It gets really, really ignored. It's just a symbol, but it's meant to convey a lot of information. Do you have any tips for how to make that symbol or symbols in general, you know, tell a story better at a trailhead?
Yeah, I'm of mixed minds. The question is, what about the yield triangle symbol that's at lots of multiple use trails, and it seems like it gets ignored a lot, and is there a better way to use that kind of iconography? It does get ignored a lot, and I really like right now the visual, the photo kinds of things. Like I would probably use actual photographic images of horses, bikers, hikers, rather than that kind of symbol. And then I think Kurt mentioned this earlier too, sign fatigue and mixing it up. You've got to, when you do have repeat visitors, they just completely don't even look because they don't think there's going to be anything new, and you have to do something to break through that's like, no, this is actually new. One more?
Do you have any suggestions how to convince people to pay their recreation fees?
Oh, boy. So the question is, how do you convince people to pay their recreation fees? There's actually some interesting research on messaging that is more effective for encouraging support for fees. I don't know how much of it's actually experimental versus sort of, labs type settings. There's always going to be a segment of the population that's incredibly opposed to anything, and usually messaging doesn't work for those kinds of folks. Persuasive messaging doesn't work. Fines work for those folks. But there really are a variety of ways. Messaging about keeping money to help manage and maintain these resources is effective.
I just wanted to say that the thing that worked for me was having a forest permit. Somebody left a piece of paper and it was a forest service person. And it said, "Thank you for buying a forest permit. That's really helpful and your money goes to this." And so when I took that off, I was like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm not so mad, I'm paying $30, right?
Yeah.
So just something like that.
Yeah.
Just something that simple.
Yep. So the comment was that when agency people leave a message on your windshield or whatever saying, "Thank you for buying your permit and we're using the money to help maintain these facilities," that can be really effective. And that's a great point because it's really true. It does speak to the audience's values, and it helps, establish more of a relationship of respect rather than we're big government, follow our rules. So yeah, that can create goodwill down the road.
Okay, thank you, Troy.
Yeah, okay.